Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy August the 28th to you and yours. Football, ladies and gentlemen, Florida State football is in your very, very immediate future, and it's good to have you here with us, 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com. We've got plenty to talk about today. We've got an interview coming up with Mr. Ira Schafel, chit-chatting about the last time these two teams squared off in 2007 in Jacksonville. He has a really good story on War Chant right now. He caught up with Xavier Lee to talk about that game, and of course, X was the big factor that turned the tide for Florida State in that game, no pun intended. So we're going to talk with him. We're going to chit-chat a little bit about the hype, the build-up, and all that. But first of all, thanks so much for waking up with us here. As I already said, over the airways at 6 a.m., 97.9 ESPN Radio, the TuneIn Radio app, our own WTSM app, the podcast, iTunes, Podcast Republic, warchantradio.com, YouTube now. Of course, is another great way to find the show. However you like the show, if you do like the show, rate and subscribe us. It always helps us out, and it always helps you out as well. Radio@warchant.com. That's your place to send questions. That's where we do the mailbag. I think we're going to start doing it on Thursdays now. So give that a nice little heads up. Wednesday before is when practice isn't open, so there's not always a ton to report unless Jimbo Fisher says something interesting at his call-in show. So it's a good day. It's a kind of, I guess you could say, the closest thing to a slow day you're going to get during college football season. So make sure you're sending your questions there, or, of course, to our Twitter account, @WakeUpWarChant. I already mentioned I'm Ryan, but Drew's on the other side of the glass today, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back, Mr. Hicken.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Got back in town yesterday, starting the fall semester today. Hopefully my last. We will see.
So how does Drew Hicken spend his summer vacation?
I didn't do much. I was just hanging out at home, not waking up at 5. Really, that's the big recuperation is you don't have classes, which is nice, and you're not waking up too early, and just kind of hanging with my family, some friends. It was a good time.
That being said, turning around, when is your first class?
It's at 8 a.m. this morning.
Ooh. So you mean to tell me you're hauling it after this?
Yeah.
Back when I used to work, when I was in college, the morning shift at CTV, it's good that it's kind of a quick turnaround, though. It's good that it's 7 to 8, because I used to have the when I was part-time at CTV when I was in college, I did 3:30 to 7:30 a.m. in the morning. I would edit the morning show, and then I wouldn't have a class till 9:30. So just trying to stay awake for that 2-hour window is a pain. So it's a good thing that you get to turn straight around, go straight to class, and it's also just good to have you back, man. Appreciate you being back with us.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about Florida State, Alabama. What else are you going to talk about on the Monday before this game? But I'll say this. It's getting to that point, and I don't want to sound resentful on the Monday before the game, but we've talked about this game for so long, and we've talked about the context of what it means and what it could mean and what a win does for either program and how bad does a loss set someone back if it does set somebody back. Drew, I don't know about you. I'm just ready to play this stinking thing. I know it's my job to talk about it. I am sick of talking about it. I just want to watch it.
Yeah, and you've seen so many of the players even tweet out, "Oh man, I'm so tired of the talk. I just want to play." And I think that's just how everyone feels at this point. This game has been building up for not even over just this offseason. It's been talked about since probably a year or two ago when it came into fruition a couple years ago. And people have been listen. We've talked about it many times. Florida State-Bama has been a matchup that people have wanted to see for a long time. And the fact that we're now finally getting to see it in a 1-3 matchup to open the season in Atlanta, it's going to be incredible. I'm really looking forward to it. I expect a really good football game. and we'll see how it goes.
I know the hype around Tallahassee was always going to be high. It was always going to be intense. People are ready for this game, but you've been out of town for a month. How is the rest of the state kind of feeling about this game? Is it the same thing, or it's just, can we just play this thing already?
Yeah, it's back home. It's definitely and where I'm from, Jacksonville, a big college football town. It's either Florida State or Florida. And people are just jacked up really for not only the start of college football, but both of those programs having big opening weekend games. And we haven't seen something like this from both of us. And I mean, you could say Ole Miss, but I feel like the Ole Miss game just isn't on this level of hype and want to see as Florida State Bama. And man, like you said, I'm tired of waiting. I can't believe we're actually this close. We're actually in game week. It seems like forever we've been talking about the hypotheticals and when it's here and what if and now it's finally here.
And I think the Ole Miss game, it was big for the folks who follow recruiting a lot and like to poke at Ole Miss, because let's face it, even though Ole Miss got all those kids and they got all those players, what did they do with them? A whole bunch of nothing. Ole Miss failed to live up to every single thing that recruiting class brought in, and everything that they brought in through that talent. And I mean, Hugh Freeze calls a couple ladies. He ends up being gone, and heck, that's something that happened while we've been away for a month. But it didn't live up to what Alabama is and what it represents, especially when it comes to the SEC. I mean, there were a couple folks who were very hyped for that Ole Miss game. There were a couple folks who thought to themselves in 2014, well, Oklahoma State's a Big 12 power. A couple years ago, they probably should have played for the national championship. That's cool. Pittsburgh in 2013. Well, they're the new member of the ACC. They managed to put together a couple good years every now and then. That'll be fine. This is Alabama. This is something that brings about a whole different air to a football game. This is a team that's never lost one of these opening kickoff games since we started doing them about 10 years ago. And they've played the gauntlet, and they've played someone from just about every stinking conference. Virginia Tech is in that graveyard. USC is in that graveyard. West Virginia is in that graveyard. Michigan is in that graveyard. And just about all of those, pretty much except the Virginia Tech game, were not incredibly close. They have a way of putting people down, and here you are, the number 3 team in the country, and you represent arguably the best challenger that has ever come to fight this guy. This is not, with all due respect to our boy Conor McGregor, this is not some guy who's stepping into the ring for the first time trying to hold his own. This is a heavyweight fight between two contenders who will throw haymakers and will fight each other and try to knock each other down and knock them cold out. Not a decision, not a technical, not somebody calling it, somebody trying to put somebody on their back by the end of the night. How much fun is that?
And you've heard it from really both sides. This is just like you said. It's not your typical opener. Bama's had theirs, we've had ours, but this is something new. This is something you haven't seen. This level, this hype towards an opening season game. And you hear it from both the players. It's nothing really but a great opportunity to see where you are right off the bat. Because both these teams know, look, at the end of the day, either of these teams could be playoff contenders. Bama's there every year. We haven't been there in the last 2 years or so, but the respect is there because they know what kind of a program Florida State is and where this particular team is projected to go. So I think when you have that from both sides and that level of respect, and they both understand the magnitude of this game, because think about it, we've talked about this game almost as a get out of jail free card, which is fine. But if you win this game, you really put yourself in the driver's seat week 1 because you just went ahead and put a really big win on your resume. And not only that, not only do you get the win, but we've seen the committee reward teams for just going out and doing it. You're going out and you're scheduling Alabama week 1. You're scheduling Florida State week 1. So it's either way. We've talked. It's kind of a get out of jail free card. But if you're able to pull it off and you're able to get that win, all of a sudden, 3 weeks into your season, you could be looking at a 3-0 Florida State team with 2 wins over top 20 teams, which is, it's huge.
It's a big deal no matter where you go, no matter who wins, no matter who loses. Unless this game is a blowout, I think just about every single fan base is going to be I don't want to say happy because you're never happy to lose, but I think everyone's just thrilled to be a part of something like this. I think the idea, win or lose, there are a lot of people, whether it be in that stadium, opening it up with the first big college football game ever to be played at Mercedes-Benz. If it's, heck, you could be in College Town with our friends at For the Table at Madison Social or Central or Township. You could be at some other bar. You could be in Jacksonville or Tampa or Miami or Orlando, and you're just going to be thrilled to see Florida State and Alabama on your TV screen. I mean, people were thrilled to see it 10 years ago when both of these teams and these programs were in the gutter. And we're going to talk with Irish Affel about that, like I said, in just a little bit. But little did we know that game, literally 10 years ago exactly, in 2007 at then Alltel Stadium, between those two teams, would end up being a precursor for two of the most dominant programs of the next decade. I think it's incredible that we've kind of come full circle, and I'm also just ready to play this stinking thing. We'll have more to talk about, of course, later on in the week as practice rolls on. Jimbo Fisher set to talk to the media today. But first of all, we got to get you caught up with everything that's going on in the world of sports. Let's hit it. This is While You Were Sleeping.
Hello. Good morning. Wake up. Wake up. Wake me up.
Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
Let's start in Cincinnati, where the Buccos beat the Reds 5-2 yesterday. Yankees all over the Mariners 10-1. They kind of look like they've gotten back to their winning ways. And, of course, playing my Tigers at this time of the year will do that to you. Minnesota goes up to the Great White North and takes a W from the Toronto Blue Jays 7-2. Cleveland at home all over Kansas City 12-0. The Fish, don't look now, but they're 3 games above 500. 6-2. Padres. Giancarlo Stanton hits number 50 of the season. That's the first National League player to do that since 2007. Speaking of 10 years ago, the Baltimore Orioles victorious in Fenway over the Red Sox 2-1. The Rockies over the Braves 3-0 in Atlanta. Phillies beat the Cubs in Philadelphia 6-3. Cubs may be starting to cool a little bit off compared to what they were, but they're still 69-60, doing just fine after the break. Mets put up 6 runs, beat the Nationals 6-5. Drew, you've been gone for a month. What's your say on the Mets?
Well, at this point, every game the Mets win is a surprise. We really might not get to 70 wins, but there's some bright spots. Rosario was the one who hit the go-ahead home run last night to take the 6-5 win. But basically everyone's hurt. Everyone's on the DL. It's your typical Mets season. Nothing really to see here. It's upsetting, but here we are. It's late in the year. I told you guys several months ago I canceled the season long ago. So.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel. I just felt like, if we finish ahead of the White Sox in the Central, the Tigers are going to be fine. And now we've dropped a series to the White Sox. And, it's only a matter of time when you are now just 4 games ahead. 7-1, the Sox yesterday over the Motor City Kitties. Tampa goes into St. Louis, beats a Cardinal team that's been playing a lot better lately, 3-2. Houston goes to Anaheim, gets a win over the Halos, 7-5. It's the Athletics over the Rangers, 8-3. In Oakland, Brewers beat the Dodgers in Dodger Stadium. Kind of hard to believe, 3-2. They've only got 91 wins, though. They're going to be just fine. I don't know how Los Angeles will survive with just 91 wins here in late August. It's the Diamondbacks shutting out the Giants in Arizona, 11-0. By the way, that Mets-Nationals game, that was a doubleheader yesterday. Nats win 5-4. When we come back, a conversation with Irish Affel about the last time Florida State and Alabama squared off on Wake Up or Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio, brought to you by your friends at For the Table. Welcome back, should I say, to Wake Up War Chant 97.9 ESPN Radio. Ryan Kelly, Drew Hicken on the other side of the glass, and Ira Schafel about to join us on the phone line. Pretty cool to know that it's finally game week. And, well, our own Ira Schafel, I guess, put out a piece that's near and dear to a certain extent to my childhood and to a lot of folks' memories of the last time Florida State played Alabama in Jacksonville at the River City Showdown is what they billed. I think I still have my ticket stub to that. Florida State ends up beating Alabama 21-14 in a game that, well, maybe wasn't completely the most well-played football game, but it was a game that was an incredible atmosphere nonetheless. And we welcome our own Ira Schafel in to talk about that game. But Ira, before we do, I believe we have a special report. I must ask, Matthew Thomas, what's going on? I figured I'd give it a theme.
We'll see today. The most recent information we had was late Friday afternoon. Of course, the events of the day on Friday for people who weren't maybe paying attention over the weekend were that Friday at lunchtime when FSU had its annual kickoff luncheon hosted by the Alumni Association, Matthew Thomas was with the team. He was in uniform. He was introduced. We actually have a little video clip of that up on More Chant. So he was with the team and looked to be a part of the program. But after talking to some sources, that wasn't necessarily officially that he's back. It was kind of they expect him to be back. And, talking to sources, that official word could have come over the weekend or it could come at some point today or it could come tomorrow. Who knows? We don't know exactly when. They're waiting on one piece of information, I guess. And again, I assume it's something to do academically, but it's there's some sort of eligibility issue. It's supposed to be cleared up, and he's supposed to be able to return to practice. And what I was told was they expect it to be cleared up. They expect him to be at practice. They expect him to play against Alabama. Now we just have to see if that happens today.
But again, it's still just in a test pattern, a hold pattern, and wait and see. But I'll say this, and it goes worth saying once again, they still seem optimistic. The very fact that they would roll him out there, the fact that they would keep people abreast of the issues that are going on, it all kind of seems to point towards they seem to think he's going to play. And at this point, Ira, I think it's worth asking the question. I don't know how much validity there is to it, but I feel like it's almost worth asking this. Do you think that even if they know that they would keep this in a holding pattern to keep Alabama on their toes?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that my guess is Alabama's going to prepare as if Matthew Thomas is there. And it's not as if Emmett Rice is a vastly different player. Now, he's not as experienced as Matthew Thomas, but he's a similar guy in terms of athleticism. Really, I'd kind of compare Emmett Rice, for people who haven't seen him. I don't have the measurements in front of me, but just by recollection, similar to like Geno Hayes' size, real athletic guy, which is what Matthew Thomas is known for. He's not quite as big, I don't think. No, I don't think there's going to be much gamesmanship. I just think they really want him out there, and as soon as they can get him out there, they'll do it.
You got a chance to catch up with Xavier Lee about that game in 2007, and I mentioned it off the top. It's a game that I think a lot of people remember the atmosphere and the pomp and circumstance around it fondly, but maybe not the 60 minutes of football that were played inside of it.
Well, I think it was 0-0 at halftime. Drew Weatherford started the game, lost his job. FSU couldn't run the ball. They couldn't really throw the ball. They went to, I think Devontae Richardson might have played a couple snaps. Like Xavier Lee goes in and actually played probably the best game of his career.
Ends up winning him the starting job for a couple weeks.
Yeah, he did. He held the starting job for about 3 games after that, and then that was the end of that. But he he played well that day. Of course, the big play that everybody remembers whenever you bring up that game is the 70-yard pass he hit to Cody Fagg, which was only about a 7 or 8 yard pass, but Fagg turned it upfield and ran past the Alabama secondary. But Xavier, it's the story I wrote was kind of his recollections of that game. He talks a lot about that game, the build up to the game, what Jimbo Fisher was like that week, which I think gives you a little bit of insight into maybe how Jimbo Fisher's preparing for this game against Nick Saban, just in terms of going up against a guy he worked for and is very familiar with. Xavier had some good things to say about that. And then also, it's looking back at Xavier's last 10 years. Things kind of went south. I mean, as excited as everybody was after that game, you thought Xavier Lee had turned the corner and was really going to fulfill that promise that he showed as the number one dual-threat quarterback in the country. And instead, like we said, kind of lost his starting job a few weeks later after playing poorly against Miami, and then he got suspended for a couple games, didn't make the bowl trip, and then declared early for the NFL draft. And football didn't turn out to be what he thought it was going to be for him. But again, I think if you read the article, it's one of those where he's grown so much over these last 10 years, and I thought his perspective was great on taking ownership of his career and some of things that went wrong. A lot of it was his doing, and so it's just kind of a nice piece. And he'll be at the game this week, and I think it's just kind of a neat wrap up 10 years later.
And on top of all that, Xavier Lee being the hero of that game kind of scripted itself out. And I'll be honest with you, what it kind of reminded me of when X was able to get things together, it kind of reminded me of a couple years ago. And I think it's only fitting that I kind of mention this because we've alluded to it on this show before, the idea that maybe Florida is going through its own lost decade. That little run that X had in that 2007 season, I can only compare it to the idea when Florida had Will Grier for those couple weeks and they beat those good teams, and you just kind of thought out of nowhere, wow, there's finally hope. Wow, there's finally this guy. And the fact that Xavier Lee was able to do this against Alabama, against the team that Bobby Bowden had eventually turned down to go there, the connections between Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban, and I want to touch more on those in a second, but the fact that he was able to do it and the fact that they were able to, I guess, give any semblance of offense after that game was so ugly for that first half, it just kind of, he became a superstar that day. And even though it didn't last for a good 2 weeks, Xavier Lee was the man if you wore garnet and gold in this state.
Yeah, it just felt like, and I even went back and read some of Bobby Bowden's quotes after the game, and he talked about, how excited he was, and Coach Bowden said that, that Xavier had been pretty patient, waiting for his turn. He and Drew Weatherford had come in together. Xavier was supposed to be the 1A recruit, the number one top recruit, and Weatherford was supposed to be kind of the fallback plan, kind of like when Jameis Winston and Sean McGuire came in together, very similar to that. But Drew was the one that was much more ready to play early, was much more diligent. Xavier kind of had a reputation back then for not really taking things seriously. And then when Jimbo Fisher came in, it was in 2007 after Xavier and Drew had already been here for a couple of years. At the time, you kind of thought maybe this would be the best possible thing for Xavier Lee. Now he's getting one of the top offensive coordinators in the country, and Jimbo Fisher. The offense is going to take a step in the right direction, and that Xavier would really kind of maybe flourish in that passing system because he played in a wide open passing attack in high school and back at Daytona, and instead it was kind of maybe the worst thing that could have happened to Xavier, because Jimbo, we all know now how demanding he is, how precise he is, how much he demands from his quarterbacks. And Xavier Lee wasn't really ready for that. It was a much looser operation under the previous, Jeff Bowden when he was offensive coordinator. Just Xavier didn't adapt. And, things went downhill pretty quickly. And, he struggled at Wake Forest. He struggled against Miami, lost the job. And then, I think at the time, his family said that, Jimbo basically told him, he wanted him to move to tight end for his senior year, and that was kind of what led to Xavier deciding to kind of go ahead and move on and declare for the NFL draft.
With all that being said, and you talking about how thorough Jimbo Fisher is and how demanding he was and how maybe it didn't completely work out with what Xavier Lee was looking for at Florida State, Jimbo Fisher took this game very, very personal, according to Xavier Lee, and it makes sense with, the ties with Nick Saban, the idea that, and this happens anytime something like this goes on, whether it be a Saban disciple playing Nick Saban, or a Belichick disciple playing Bill Belichick, or a Parcells disciple playing Parcells. You can go down the line in football. The idea of breaking under somebody's shadow, becoming your own coach, becoming your own person, Jimbo Fisher really took that to heart. And on top of all that, Jimbo's already pretty rigorous preparation. You saw day in, day out, and if you read the article on warchant.com, just how thorough offensively they were with their game plan, where every down, every distance, every situation, Jimbo Fisher had it charted out to what Alabama was going to do.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Xavier Lee, again, he did not part on the best of terms with Jimbo Fisher, and he admits that. And, and again, it was kind of legendary, the things you would hear behind the scenes about them going, just head-to-head and kind of clashing. But, looking back on it, he really just was, couldn't say enough good things about how prepared Jimbo had them to face Nick Saban's defense. And it was kind of, they caught him at the right time too. I mean, Nick Saban, whereas Jimbo Fisher's first year as offensive coordinator at FSU, it was also Nick Saban's first year as head coach at Alabama after his, failed stint with the Dolphins. And, but Xavier really praised Jimbo, the preparation. And he said, and I asked him, because obviously Jimbo Fisher has been asked a million times over the last 8-9 months leading up to this game, does it take on more meaning because of your relationship with Nick Saban? And Jimbo always says, just another game. It's the biggest game because it's the next game. But Xavier said you could tell during the 2 weeks. They actually had 2 weeks to prepare for that game. They had a bye the week before. And he said you could tell that Jimbo really, really wanted that game. Not that he doesn't want other games, but he really, really wanted that game. And, they could tell after the fact how much it meant to him. And, and again, Xavier thinks that it would be similar this time. Not that he's close to Jimbo Fisher today, but just knowing him and, from the time he spent with him, he just figures it would mean a lot to him as a head coach to take a win against Nick Saban when, again, Nick Saban and Bobby Bowden were his two mentors, but Saban was the one that really kind of was his boss when Jimbo kind of came out on the national scene.
What do you remember about the atmosphere of that game, Ira? What do you remember about just being there and kind of taking it in?
Man, it was pretty cool. It was definitely a cool day. And the thing is about it seems like every time almost FSU goes to Jacksonville, it's been a great atmosphere. In the years I've been covering Florida State, and I know they had gone there before then, but the Coach Bowden's last game there, the game against was it West Virginia when Leon Washington had the big game in the Gator Bowl.
Yep.
And then obviously in this game with Alabama, I just remember there was a lot of build up to it because of the Alabama angle and then also the Fisher Saban angle. But the day of the game, just Alabama had a huge presence there, as you'd expect. And it was cool, man. It was cool seeing those two programs on the field together, even though both teams would end up being pretty average. I think they both finished 7-6. It was still early in the year. You didn't know that was going to happen. I think each team might have had one loss at that point, maybe 3-1 or 4-1, something like that. And as you said, the football wasn't very good in the first half, but there was a lot of excitement going into the game. And then the last quarter was pretty fun because FSU opened up a 14-0 lead. Then it was 14-7. Then Dakota Fag caught the big pass from Xavier Lee and kind of clinched the win.
And it's funny that this game ends up kind of being a sign of things to come. Not immediately for Florida State. It would still be a couple years before Jimbo Fisher would take over the program. But as bad as Alabama was that year, people forget they were a win against Florida the next year away from being in the national championship. Of course, they end up cashing in 2009, but it's amazing as, we've both said it, as that game could be for 3 quarters. That game ends up being the foreshadowing for two of the most dominant programs for the next decade of college football.
No, you're right. And it also, there was a behind-the-scenes thing from that game. When I was just thinking about it, my other big memory from that game was something, again, behind the scenes. I actually wrote about it for the Osceola at the time, who I worked for at the time. But there was a really interesting moment after the game when in the bowels of the stadium, Nick Saban, I think, had gone to his press conference first. The losing team had their press conference first. He goes and meets with the media, and then he's coming out and walking down the hallway. And I saw, there were a couple of Alabama fans who tried to get an autograph from him. They somehow got down inside the stadium. And not only did Saban not stop for them, but he kind of had his security detail kind of usher them away and kind of get him out of his space so he could keep walking. Meanwhile, Bobby Bowden, after his press conference, now granted, Coach Bowden won and Nick Saban lost, but still, Bobby Bowden, after his press conference, gets approached by a bunch of fans. And he could not have spent more time taking pictures, signing autographs, just being Bobby Bowden. And I remember it was so interesting to see them that close in time at the same location and how different they were and how differently they handled the fans. That's something that kind of always stuck with me.
It's one of those things where Bobby was Bobby and Nick was Nick, I guess you could kind of say. But to put in, I guess, kind of an exclamation point on this part before we move on a little bit, Ira, do you know if X is going to be at the game on Saturday?
Yeah, he actually is, man. And that's something else we'll be doing a story on maybe later today. Just how many former players are coming back for this game. It's a huge, this game is big for fans. And, I think sometimes we forget that the former players are huge fans as well. And, it's a long line of former players who are expected to be at this game. And I'll kind of run down some of those in that article. But Xavier Lisey's flying in with his wife on Thursday. They're going to do some of the, FSU parties on Friday, do tailgating on Saturday. A bunch of the former players are going to be tailgating together. Guys like Jacksonville's finest, Tony Carter, and a bunch of other guys as well. So, and it's going to be neat because you're going to have guys from different eras. Some guys who are in the NFL right now. Of course, Devontae Freeman plays there. He's expected to be there on the sideline. And then a lot of guys who played recently, and then a lot of guys who played a long time ago. And I think the toughest thing for FSU is going to be figuring out how many guys they can get on the sideline, because you can't give sideline passes to everybody that ever played at FSU, but there's a long line of guys trying to come to that game.
I think the thing is, well, let me just go on record right now. Devontae Freeman's got to be the guest picker on game day on Saturday, right?
That would be a good choice. You're right about that.
And while we're here, can I just usher a challenge to College Game Day this season? Every time they come to a Florida State game this year, because let's face it, there's a good chance they're in Tallahassee in 2 weeks for FSU Miami. Can we get better guest pickers? It's no shot at the folks who've been on before, because there have been some good guest pickers before, but it's not like there aren't a ton of Florida State players in the NFL who maybe have a bye week. That's all I'm saying.
I feel like the guest picker thing overall is kind of gone off the rails in the recent years. I mean, it's just they end up with people who don't even have any ties to anybody. They just show up like just celebrities. I don't know. I used to love the guest picker part, but it's kind of, to me, it just seems like it's gone off the rails.
Anyway, Ira, we're finally to the week. I know we don't have much longer, but what are you looking from Florida State this week right now, and how do you feel about this game as it stands Sunday night when we're recording this, and Monday when it's going to hit air?
I think the biggest thing to look for, I would say, is probably just Matthew Thomas getting back. If that happens, what that does for the defense, I think that's a big deal. I think some people are worried because he's missed a lot of practice time. He's missed about 3 weeks of practice time. But, I think the fact that he's a senior, the fact that I'm sure he's keeping in great condition, I think he'll be fine to play as long as he gets back to practice this week. That's the big thing. Other than that, really, to be honest with you, they just got to stay injury-free. I mean, I think that they've accomplished what they wanted to accomplish during preseason. Jimbo seemed very happy when we talked to him. What was it on Thursday or Friday? Thursday. And then on Friday, he spoke at the kickoff luncheon again. I think he's very happy with what they accomplished during camp. And so now it's just, staying healthy, putting in their game plan. And then I think the other big thing, and one other thing that another former player I spoke to who's going to be at the game, Brian McFadden, he's going to be in the piece I'm writing about former players coming back. He just talked about how important it is to not get too excited, to be ready for the atmosphere, and not just kind of not overdo it. Not overdo it in pregame, not get too amped up, because that controlling your emotions is going to be maybe one of the important factors that people don't think about in that game.
I'm just ready for it to be here. I'm ready for. How much football did you digest over the weekend between Colorado State and FAMU and everybody playing?
Not enough, man. Not enough, to be honest with you. We had some family stuff going on Saturday, kind of last weekend that I knew I would have a little free time, so tried to spend some time with the family, but I caught some of it, and just enough to kind of whet my appetite, and I really can't look forward to this week enough.
Well, Ira, thank you as always, my friend. Always appreciated.
Thanks, Ryan. Take care.
There's more on the other end, folks, as Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Yes, Florida State just landed a 5-star commitment.
I don't see that anywhere online. How did you get that news so fast?
I'm on the new warchant.com app. I get news updates and scores pushed to my phone instantly.
How much does it cost?
It's free. Just go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, type in Warchant, and install it on your phone. That's it.
A free app that keeps me constantly up to date on Florida State sports and recruiting? Wow, that makes it incredibly easy to follow my Seminoles and never miss out.
With the app, you'll also get quick access to all the stories and features on Warchant, including the ever-popular message boards that feature thousands of fans talking about the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Welcome back to Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Couple pretty fun games over the weekend. Maybe they shouldn't have been fun. Let's face it, that South Florida game probably shouldn't have been fun as it was for quite a while. But, Drew, how much football did you end up digesting over the weekend?
I honestly didn't get a ton, just because Saturday for me was pretty much all Mayweather-McGregor. We were setting up at buddies' houses, and we were just getting ready for that. I got to catch a little bit of the FAMU Rattlers. I was actually out to dinner when the USF game started, and I saw the Twitter timeline panicking, basically saying, "Oh, everybody lied about USF all summer." I said, "Oh, let me go check the score," and it was like 16-0. I was like, "Oh dear!" But you figured they'd come back, and they did. But
well, I think the thing is, and actually, I got to go to the FAMU game. That was the first FAM game I've ever been able to go to. I said to myself, I'm usually working on the weekends. I don't have a chance, even when FSU's out of town, usually. Let's go. Let's have some fun. And we did have some fun. And FAM won. Pretty big win. 29-7. Alex Wood's crew. Happy for them. Happy for our friends over on the highest of the Seven Hills. But back on Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio, For the Table, Madison Social, Central Island Township, bringing it to you every single day. I'm with you on the South Florida score. And I think it's just because people are so ready and they're so fascinated by that. I feel like even though they're the only ranked team in the top 25 that's not a Power 5 team, people are so interested in Charlie Strong because they feel like this is either going to go one of two ways. This is going to be brilliant or this is going to be terrible. And he can't make it work here. If Charlie Strong can't make it go here, with as much talent as there was on that team, with as winnable as the American is, especially Houston maybe having to pick up some of the pieces, especially after they had a disappointing season last year, this is South Florida's to lose. This is a New Year's Six bowl for South Florida, and a lot of people feel like it's almost gift wrapped to them based on where the American is as a conference right now, unless Navy somehow puts it together and has a really good year. And I feel like more than just about any other program, there are more eyes on Charlie Strong than there have been on that program, and there have been on him outside of course, last season in a long time. And that's good news for South Florida if they win. Because if they don't put it together, man, we start to write a really nasty narrative on a guy that a lot of people seem to think is a really good coach.
Right, because I think if you ask just about anybody who your favorite team outside of the Power 5 is, everyone points to USF. It's the obvious choice just because of really the returning talent that they have.
Quentin Flowers alone.
Yeah, as well as just having Charlie Strong. And, I mean, they're the USF fighting Charlies at this point. And if they don't get it done this year, I mean, like you said, it's really going to start to quickly change the narrative. Obviously, Charlie Strong has taken a lot of hits since his time at Texas, but I think a lot of people feel like that situation was tough enough to overcome that they still believe in Charlie Strong, the coach. But if he came to USF and kind of blew that up, I think you're right. I think that'd be a really tough situation for him to bounce back from. I think you would probably see his last head coaching gig if he wasn't able to get things going at USF. But he's got all the pieces, and I still think Charlie Strong's a good football coach. I think he was handed a really tough situation at Texas. I think everyone knows that. We'll see. I'm not panicking on USF after one quarter of football. I expect them to be just fine, 11-1, 10-2, whatever you have. I don't know.
I think they're a really good squad, and they're set up for a lot of success. But we've got a minute or two. You can say your piece on Mayweather-McGregor. I'll say mine. It was a good fight. That was as much fun. Listen, if someone can draw a fun fight out of Floyd Mayweather, I don't care if they won or lost, it was a success. And for 10 rounds of boxing, I really enjoyed watching that fight.
Honestly, that's you can say whatever you want to say, but that fight was at least 2,000 times more entertaining than Mayweather-Pacquiao. I mean, Mayweather-Pacquiao was a disaster. And that fight, everything leading up to it, you felt like you were getting everything you wanted to get leading up to it, and the fight was going to be a dud. I think that's what a lot of people thought. That fight surprised me. I had a lot of fun watching it. I would have liked to have seen what would have happened because while I do think McGregor won the earlier rounds, it's obvious that was Mayweather's plan the entire time. McGregor got outboxed, but you saw McGregor had a little bit more skill than I think a lot of people thought he would. He got a little frustrated at times and threw some back of the head hammer fists and whatnot, and would talk about grabbing Floyd's back. He gave me his back in the fight, so I used all this energy getting his back. Blah blah blah. I thought it was a good fight. I was really entertained. I would have liked to have seen what could have happened had Conor not have gotten gassed. Like, for instance, if that was Mayweather's plan to let him have the earlier rounds and McGregor doesn't get gassed, how does that go?
Well, I'll say this. I respect that Conor McGregor decided basically in doing that and doing things that were maybe on the edge of the rules that would maybe cause the average boxing judge to shed off a point or two. I respect that he knew no matter what he did, he could literally look like Evander Holyfield in that ring against Floyd. And if that went to a decision, he was going to lose.
Right.
He knew that.
He had to knock him out. Everyone knew that. I love Conor McGregor. I gave him about a 0% chance to win that fight. Maybe he knocked him out by some grace of God, but he, like I said, I think he did a lot better than I expected and than a lot of people expected. I think he earned a lot of respect by putting himself out there for that fight.
We had football. We had one of the first great big boxing matches in a very long time. It's a good weekend for sports, and it's only going to get better this weekend, folks. We're putting a bow on it right after this. Wake Up War Chant, 97.9 ESPN Radio.
What's with these homies dissing my girl? Why do they got her front? What did we ever do to these guys that made them so violent?
Maybe you're looking to get in the festive mood a little early. Well, the happy hour over at For the Table is going to be the place to do that on a Monday. After work, 4 to 7. It's the best happy hour in town. 3 different experiences, all the same great deal. Madison Social, Central and Township, right there on Madison Street. Listen, there's some folks who are probably going to get a little creative when it comes to sneaking in some beverages or something into that game on Saturday, but I don't know if they're going to be quite as creative as someone in the UK who tried to sneak themselves a bottle of vodka into a racetrack in a salami sandwich. And I've got the picture right here, Drew, if you want to see this guy. Someone has literally just put a bottle of vodka right there in the middle of a hoagie. It was spotted.
He dug out the bread and everything, it looked like.
Yeah, it's like carved out. It's kind of like...
It's pretty good.
Kind of like the people who like carve out a book or a Bible or something to hide the family gun in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's... I'm impressed with it. I'm not much of a drinker, but I will say this: if I'm trying to sneak something into a game, that's the way to do it. That's how you go about it. Don't mind me in the sandwich, sir. We'll be just fine.
So I'm assuming by the picture, though, they got caught?
They were caught. Okay. Security caught them. No word on if security let them keep the sandwich, though. So that's a bummer. Anyway, we're wrapped up, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk a little bit more FSU-Bama tomorrow. Drew, my thanks to you as always, sir. Good to have you back. Thanks to you guys for listening. Mike and Mike's up next. 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Hey, thanks for downloading today's show. If you haven't already, why don't you rate and subscribe us? We certainly do appreciate it, and of course, we appreciate you listening anyway, so just go ahead and click that right there. You know you want to. Come on. Come on. Thanks again for letting us do the show. We love giving you all the football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, all year round. Not just football season, not just spring practice, but hopefully giving you the freshest and newest FSU content every day. Thanks, guys.